Greetings and welcome back to our ongoing discussion of SQL. This is video 3, which will discuss the distinct keyword. It's based upon chapter 3 in the free SQL book. The objective for this keyword distinct is to remove duplicate rows from a result table. To illustrate this keyword, there are 5 sample queries we will present. Then there's a couple of other related topics, qualified table names and metadata, and then a comment on the efficiency indices. Question is, why would we want to avoid duplicate rows? Well, there's a very strong guideline that pertains to base tables. Designers of tables set design specifications before each table is actually created. A strong guideline for every table is that each row should be distinct, which is why you saw the P&O column designated as unique in the preceding discussion of the create table statement. In fact, all tables in the free SQL database will contain distinct rows. In the result tables, things are different. Duplicate rows can appear, although we have not illustrated that yet. We will shortly. We don't like duplicate rows. They're potentially confusing, and therefore we have the keyword distinct that helps us remove such rows. But first, let's look at a single column table for tutorial purposes. And we will not specify distinct, and because presumably you already know that the state column in the preserved table does contain duplicate values, if the query objective is to display all values in that column, very simple query, select state from preserve. If we eyeball this result table, Arizona, Montana, hey, there's Arizona again and Montana again. Duplicate rows will appear. Let's make them go away. We're going to specify the keyword distinct to satisfy this objective. We have the same query objectives, display the state column of every row in the preserved table, but it says do not display duplicate rows. There it is. We specify the keyword distinct. All right. After the keyword select, we look at the result, Arizona before Massachusetts, before Montana, 3 distinct values. However, I bring to your attention, you have an incidental sort here. We have no order by clause in this select statement, but the rows appear to be sorted, and that will happen quite frequently. If you want to know why that happens, read the appendix at the end of this chapter. Otherwise, if it happens, so what? Now we get a more realistic multi-column result table. It's just going to be 2 columns again for tutorial purposes. And observe that pairs of state and fee values may contain duplicates. This takes a little bit more know your data observation. So we state again, display state and fee values. And we put an order by clause in this statement simply to make things easier to observe. If you observe the second, third, and fourth rows of this table, you see duplicate pairs of values. Why? This sample statement did not use the keyword distinct. That's what we do on the following sample query. We say display distinct pairs of state and fee values. We realize that objective by specifying the keyword distinct. And again, we sort the result values to make things easier to observe. Now, note that the first two rows in the result are not duplicates. All right? Some people think mistakenly the keyword distinct applies to duplicate values. No, it's duplicate rows. Here's the type of mistake that is easy to observe that may be made by a rookie. If somebody says this, select distinct column 1 in some arbitrary table, does not specify distinct for the second column, and does specify distinct for the third column, they will get an error message. They have a misunderstanding of what the purpose of the keyword distinct means. This erroneous statement implies the user wants to get distinct values in one column but will accept duplicate values in another column. Don't do that. Know your data. You will not need to specify distinct if you know the rows are going to be distinct anyways, because the select clause references a unique column like the P&O column. All right. If one column value is unique, any other column values that follow that column won't undo the uniqueness. Another circumstance is the query happens to retrieve exactly one row, as would be the case if you said where P&O equals a particular value. If there's only one row, there's no possibility of duplicate rows. Let's look at the following query. Display the P&O and acres values for nature preserves in Montana. All right, we're selecting the P&O, so there's no possibility of duplicates, as can be observed in the result table. All right, amen. Go back to the query objective for a moment. There's no need to specify do not display duplicate rows. This statement as part of the query objective would not be wrong, but it would be redundant, and it might be written by a business user who is unaware of the fact that P&O values are unique. Therefore, when you select the P&O column, there's no need to specify distinct, but we have an interesting, somewhat academic question. Maybe we should just always specify distinct and be done with it. Occasionally that's done by some users. If you're interested in that academic question, I invite you to read the appendices, again, in particular the theory appendix. Now some of the related topics. The first topic pertains to qualified table names. Let's assume you are Jacqueline Juniper. You're a SQL user. And your user ID is JJ followed by some numbers. This is your unique qualified table, qualified, let me start again. This is your unique user ID. Now you set about to create a table called preserve and you populate it with some rows. After doing so, you might want to, you being Jacqueline, you might want to look at the data that you've put in that preserved table. So you execute simple statement, select star from preserve. The system automatically, under the hood, takes your user ID and plugs it in front of the preserve table. Comment: sometimes this user ID is also a schema name, which I won't discuss now. There's a relationship between user IDs and schema names. Let's just keep it simple for now. Now there's some other users of this database, and these folks, Josephine Violet, have a user ID of JV followed by some numbers, and Johnny Trouble has JT followed by some numbers. All right. Let's assume Josephine and Johnny also create tables called preserve, which could be very different tables with different columns. Well, now we have two more preserved tables in the database, but they have different qualified table names. So be it, when they select data from their preserved table, the system puts their unique ID in front of it and all goes well. With permission, however, you, being Jacqueline, could access Josephine's preserved table by specifying her user ID in front of the preserved table. How you get this permission, we will not discuss. The next topic is about metadata. We mentioned that in a previous video. We want to say a few words about it now. If you look at your SQL page, whereas in the past we only looked at the SQL panel and the result panel, we're going to bring to your attention to another panel, which is a metadata panel, and that's the third panel among the many different panels on the real world SQL pages. If you go into that metadata panel, somehow you'll arrive at something that I will call frame 1 here. And in it you will see information about the users of the system. You will see information about all the tables in the system or just those tables that you have permission to examine. Assume you click on tables and a whole list of table names came up. Bird, haven't heard about that table at all. Employee, oh yeah, we heard about that table if you've been doing the exercises because you've created the sample data. You've poked around with the employee table. Haven't heard about the fish table before. Oh, hey, there's our table, the preserved table. You know, I kind of forgot the data types of these columns. So I'm going to click on preserve. And there's the P&O column, integer data type. It's not null like all the other columns, but the P&O column is the unique column, and it's the only unique column. And the other data, which you can see pretty much reflects the code that was placed into the create table statement. Passing comment, the system stores this metadata in a location which is called a data dictionary. Side comment, you know what the data dictionary is? It's a bunch of tables. I might say more about that later on, but it's not my intention to do so now. Here is an example of a real-world SQL page, and we looked at it before, This is the DB2 front-end tool. And whereas before we just looked at the SQL panel and the result panel, now I take you over to the far left-hand side of the page, and you will see that there's a way to look at all the databases, follow down to the free SQL databases. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. Ignore all that other stuff. I've highlighted tables. And if you click on tables, over on the right hand side of the page, you'll see a list of table names, NTAB, NTAB2, NTAB3. We'll see those later on, and we get down to the preserve table. Now, if you look to the left, you see this schema, DB2 admin. This is my home system. My ID is the DB2 admin ID, and it's referred to as a schema here. Don't worry about that. Now, I see all the tables, and maybe I want to explore some of these other tables, and I could do so. Now, if I click on the preserve entry here, up comes another entry, and on the right-hand side, you will see the names of all the columns in the preserve table. You will see the schema name. You will see the table name over and over again. And not shown here, but further to the right, you'll see the data type of each column, etc. The mechanics I've shown here will differ for Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, etc. Want to make some concluding observations about unique columns. Note that you know that P&O is unique. And by the way, that observation was important back in Sample Query 3.5 that we just examined. Also, if you review the preceding chapter where we talked about the order by clause, there were circumstances there where it was useful to know what columns were unique and what columns were not unique. For tutorial purposes, the design of the preserved table is not complex. However, you still might ask the following questions. Because some tables can have multiple unique columns, we might ask the question, is pname unique? Notice it's not declared to be unique in the create table statement for the preserve table. From a real-world perspective, it's unlikely that the Nature Conservancy would give the same name to two different preserves. But what if some folks who have a lot of money, Taylor Swift or Warren Buffett, they take out their checkbook and write a check to buy a bunch of land in the state of Montana, and they call it, Warren does anyways, calls it the Warren Buffett Preserve. And they say, okay, good name. Well, Warren goes a step further. He goes into Massachusetts and buys another big chunk of land, makes it a Nature Conservancy Preserve, and he says, hey, I would like to name this the Warren Buffett Preserve. So what if there's a similar preserve out in Montana? To guard for that possibility, the database designer said we will not make p-name values unique. But you know what? You might have a combination of columns which are not unique. So a combination of non-unique columns is unique. We know that in the preserved table, state column is not unique. And we've just said that perhaps for good reason, hopefully a Warren Buffett or Taylor Swift come along and give us some money for two preserves, that we will have P names are not unique. But is the combination of state P name column unique? Well, we don't know, and it's unspecified. There is a way to specify it. We just haven't shown you that, okay? But in this particular circumstance, maybe the nature preserve says P name columns are not unique globally, but within an individual state, we should not have two preserves with the same name. And if they want to do that, that is possible. What I'm driving at is here. The uniqueness of columns is simple in our little tutorial preserve table. But when we get into more complex designs, in the spirit of knowing your data, you could have other unique columns, other unique combination of columns, and knowing that data could have an impact on your coding of an order by clause and a distinct clause. Okay, that concludes this relatively short tape, this relatively short video, I should say. The next video pertains to Chapter 4, where we leave the Know Your Data observations and start focusing on logic. Thank you again. See you in the following video.